Hello! Welcome Twitchland. This is another weekly broadcast. In fact, the second weekly broadcast on App Game Kit, AGK, Tier 1 to Tier 2, for anyone who is even remotely interested. Just make sure I'm on the right screen, actually. Gotta make sure you're actually looking at the right screen, you know. So, is it the right screen? Yes, there you go. So now you can all see the front page of TGC, but that's not our final destination. Our final destination is, of course, this forum. Because if anyone has tuned into the last week's broadcast, now this isn't Game Guru, this is AGK. I slotted in the AGK Twitch broadcasts on Thursday, which is a day after the Game Guru ones, just to see if there was any traction, if anyone was interested in this to becoming a regular thing, or whether it's just sufficient in order to fulfill its purpose, which is to move anyone that's interested in checking out Tier 2 and are currently using Tier 1 to make that process a little smoother. And in addition to that, because we know there's a lot of really top Tier 1 programmers out there, we have a project running that's Tier 2 only right now, but it has a big boon at the end. You can earn 500 quid by writing a relatively small and simple educational app. And we have openings for coders who are interested, but it has to be Tier 2. So that's what this facilitates. You know your potatoes, you can create games, you can create apps, that's not the problem, but it's all Tier 1. And you want to be able to participate in what we're doing when we're using Tier 2. So at the end of the last week's broadcast, and I don't think it was a long broadcast, it was supposed to be 30 minutes, I can't remember whether it was 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but at the end of it I said if you wanted me to witter on about something specific, then post it here in the Twitch broadcast thread, which included my initial announcement, and ultimately it featured the video which I posted. It went to YouTube because I know it was sprung on everyone. I think gave people about 30 minutes notice, and no one knew it before that time. I put it on my Twitter, but I guess, yeah, it wasn't really widely advertised. So perhaps the word has got around this time, and a few more people have figured out that, he's going to be talking again, the crazy fool, on Thursday. So it's Thursday today, it's 4 PM, British summertime, though you wouldn't realise it by looking out the window. It is actually pretty horrible right now. Don't see any sun, so I don't know where the summertime part of British summertime came from. Certainly British, but that's about where the similarity ends. So my forum has a little blue highlight to say things that I've not read before. And I'm just going to see if there's any sort of questions that people want me to cover in this session, because I don't really want to leave people in the dark. I think I skimmed it about 4 minutes ago, and it didn't seem that there was any sort of glaring issue, which means I did a great job. Hooray! Hooray for me. So, great video. I'm converted, scared of C++ before. That's brilliant. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Just to take the horror story out of C++. It really isn't that scary. I might look into this once Rush to Adventure is complete. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, absolutely. I would highly recommend that before you move to another development environment, or a variant of a development environment, or upgrading a development environment, please finish, test and release what it is you're working on. Changing a development environment halfway through a project is never good. Sometimes it's a good idea, but it's never going to be the most expedient way to go to release. Usually it introduces lots of new challenges, ultimately delaying your project, sometimes sabotaging your project. So very good principle to finish what you've done. If you did want to check it out in parallel, set it up in another part of your computer. Keep your original project files very safe. We've got an awesome from Cole. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lee. Tier 2 seems a little less scary. That's my goal. And I might repeat the highlights today if there's no real questions at the end of this. We do have from Judy. We have 2 questions. If someone could help. Can some Tier 2 coding be incorporated into Tier 1 code? Or do they both need to be totally separate? You can kind of do anything you want when you have access to Tier 2. If you wanted to take the Tier 1 interpreter code and then get your bytecode and have that bytecode loaded into what is now your Tier 1 interpreter and have that run Tier 1 code, and then inject your own commands just by hacking in the command switch table and sticking your own commands, which then calls your Tier 2 functions, That's certainly possible. But you'll not find any documentation on that. That's for someone who's probably familiar with both Tier 1 and Tier 2, can read the Tier 1 interpreter source code, understand most of it, and then be able to hack something together. That's certainly possible. Not something I'd highly recommend. In fact, we had a recent project decision whether we should do that, and we decided against it and go entirely to Tier 2. Simply because we end up with a slightly better debug environment, it's going to produce slightly faster binary, and it just gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of code structure, data structures, teams working together on the same file, that sort of thing. It just gives lots of extra liberty, which is why we went for Tier 2. And pretty much most of the people making the decisions were all C++ programmers, so you can see why that decision got to where it did. Perhaps if there's more Tier 1s in the discussion, it might have been a different outcome, but that's the way it was. So that was your first answer to the first question. From Lee's video, it suggests we write a program initially in Tier 1, then convert it to Tier 2. Is this what most are doing whilst learning? So I would do it. Yeah, I'd prototype in Tier 1, the one I'm comfortable in, get something on screen, then see what it would look like in Tier 2 by following the video advice and just moving it across. But once you're familiar with Tier 2, in fact this might be a good subject for the video actually, for this video. What happens if you want to write something from scratch in Tier 2 without having to write one? So yeah, that's great. I'm holding on to that until something better comes along. So that's a really good suggestion, thanks for that. Even though you didn't think it was a suggestion, actually has just become one. Hockey Kid, long time user, quotes the second question. You could go Tier 1 to Tier 1, however I wouldn't suggest it. The point of Lee's video was mainly to show how easy it can be to hop from Tier 1 to Tier 2. However, it does not cover, brackets, because it is not the purpose of the video, the differences between BASIC and C++. No, it doesn't. If you have never done any C++ other than convert method, it's a good way to get your feet wet, definitely. The reason I wouldn't suggest doing it for more than just getting acquainted with the language is because there are concepts from BASIC that aren't acceptable or as straightforward in C++. Yeah, like spaghetti code, which are go-tos, which nobody wants. Even though I don't think there is a go-to in DB Pro. Haha, that's my ancient fading brain at work there. Don't think there's any go-to commands in AGK. There is a go-to command in C++. How upside down is that? For example, global variables in C++ are generally not recommended. Absolutely not, no. If you came from the classical teachings of C++, global variables are evil. I use them all the time because I'm not evil. Another example is C++ has references and pointers. These differences would really change the layout, flow and organization of your game for the better if done in C++ from the start. Yeah, absolutely. The classical approach to writing C++ from scratch has numerous and immeasurable benefits, but to squeeze them into 30 minutes of video wasn't really ever possible. I'd certainly challenge someone to come up with a video link which teaches you everything you need to know about C++ in 30 minutes, because it's something I'd like to watch. I don't think even I know everything there is to do in C++. Things like class inheritance and superclasses, I can use them if I do a bit of cut and paste and then scratching my head, but no, could I write one from scratch and then explain it entirely to someone else? No. It's quite a big subject. So if you are Tier 1, certainly follow the video to get your feet wet. If you want to do it properly, you want to become a C++ programmer, going into the games industry and being a serious, doing this full-time sort of programmer, you might want to pick up like a C++ book and start from, chapter 1 and then read through 300-400 pages and do lots and lots of examples just to get familiar with the foundations. What I'm basically doing is throwing you in sort of at the deep end but with water wings. So you get the enjoyment of the end result, but in a safe environment. I suppose that's the closest analogy as I can make up as I go along. The water looks a bit deep. It's very deep. When I say the deep end, you have no idea how deep it is. But you've got some water wings, so that's fine. I'll keep you at the surface for as long as you need to be. Has the video been posted? Yes, there it is. It's AGK porting App Gain Kit Tier 1 to Tier 2 easily. It's... how long is it? 55 minutes. Okay, so it wasn't exactly 30 minutes. it's probably 30 minutes in actual information and then another 25 minutes of me waffling. I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm wondering how much faster Tier 2 is than Tier 1. Right now I'm trying to get a good frame rate with GoTeam on Amazon Fire, but it slows down a lot when any spine skeletons are displayed. I don't think you'll see a remarkable speed up. Tier 1 simply just calls all the Tier 2 functions. So when you code in Tier 2, you simply make those calls yourself. And something like the spine skeleton system is always, in the fastest possible binary. If you've got a lot of those calls, every time you do a command in Tier 1, it's wrapped up and then a Tier 2 command at some point gets called. Whereas Tier 2, you can just call it directly. And there's other things you can do to speed up your main loop. But I must warn you, the Amazon Fire TV isn't the fastest break out the block, to be honest. So when you're targeting those kind of platforms, you really want to conserve at every level. Sounds, graphics, memory, how much you're getting done in the main loop, splitting up the main loop as much as possible. Do as little as you can in that loop, keep that loop fast. The common things. And we've run to the end of the forum post. No more posts here. So I'm going to take the lead on this part. What if you had to start a Tier 2 project from scratch? And I want to keep this nice and quick, this video, so I'm only going to do it something everyone knows about, Hello World, for example. So let's have a little peek at that. So Hello World would be Tier 2. So if we leave this alone for a second, we go to my Steam folder and down to AGK Tier 2, which is this. If anyone remembers the video last week, we created this, Your Snake Snacker. And if you want to know what this is and what I'm referring to, just go back to video 1 and check that out. It is on the Game Guru channel, which is a bit odd putting it there. So we're probably going to move all this to the AGK channel. If there's a call for it, if people keep requesting links for it, then we'll give it its own home and maybe add to the collection. But it's time, it remains to be seen whether this is actually a popular way to deliver information. Certainly have to listen to a lot of me before you get to the juicy stuff. So if we wanted to start one from scratch, it's kind of very similar, in fact, to doing a T1 to T2 port. You would just have to come with a bit of knowledge when you start it. So again, you go to App Game Kit. That gets installed when you install it on Steam, or when you install it from the standalone installer, you'd find the App Game Kit 2 folder with Tier 2 folder inside it. And inside that, there's a folder called Apps. And then when you've got your apps, you've got all these things. Now again, because Windows is the platform I develop on mostly, I'm going to use a Windows template. But there's nothing to stopping you using an Android one, or if you're actually on a Mac, you can actually use the template we've provided for that. But I'm going to use this because I'm using 2005. And again, you highlight it, cut and paste. That makes an exact copy of that folder and all its contents. Then you rename it to something that's going to be your new project. So let's say I wanted to make the most amazing game in the world, and I'm going to call it Hello World. And notice I'm not using any spaces. The only reason I do that is I've just noticed all the other folders don't use spaces, so I'm just going to follow that lead. So hello_world. Go inside there. This is basically what's called a template project and file set. It's the minimum you can have in a Tier 2 setup. In Tier 1, I'll show you Tier 1. Get rid of that for a sec. And I go to New Project, hello_hellworld, _world, create. See, it gives you those lines and it sort of helps you along, so you can just press run and you'll get a screen FPS. Well, imagine that all these files is kind of the same thing. It's the minimum you need so something would happen. So I've already got Microsoft Visual Studio 2015 set up. I've got the Community Edition. It's free. You can get it from Microsoft. Just download it. Once you've installed it, as soon as you go into this folder, you'll see Microsoft Visual Studio Solution. That means it's fine. It's set up. So then you can just double click it with the left mouse button. It'll launch the Community Edition, and then the Community Edition will load this project into it. And after it's done a few scans of the headers, you're ready to rock. And just like last week, you don't even want to call it template, you want to give it your own name. So I'm going to call my project, or rather solution, hello world. Then we call my individual project. And the reason I've separated these is imagine a solution is the parent and the project is all the children of that parent. So you can have lots of children inside one parent, like quadruplets. So there you go. We've renamed that. You could rename these. In fact, we'll do that now. Why not? Or have we got a little bit of time so we can have some fun? So how would you rename these? Well, this is what I would do. I'm sure there's a really quick way. I mean, because I've been using Visual Studio forever, right? So there was ways you had to do things, and as the versions of Visual Studio got better, us oldies still kept using all the original stuff, so we don't know all the new features. So it's got to rename. Let's see if it actually renames the source file as well. So we're going to call this hello world. What I mean by source file is before I do anything, look at the folder. It's got template.cpp and template.h. Normally I'd have to rename these, delete these, re-add those, and then I get the new one. But maybe I can rename this and that all at the same time. So hello world, and then this one, because what we're hoping for, do that and that. What we're hoping for is it changed. There we go. Yeah, it changed the file names. Hooray! Wow, Visual Studio is getting a lot better than it used to be. So there you go. So we don't have to do that extra work. And now we end up with these two files. These are the two. Ignore core, ignore external dependencies, ignore references, ignore almost everything for the moment. The only two things you need to worry about is all this and all this. And there's one thing you need to do when you change this is the relationship between a CPP and a header file. How would I do this? Imagine the header file is sort of giving you all the contents page of your program, and then the CPP file is all the individual chapters, all the text and pictures and everything else. So the header file pretty much preps you for the rest of the program, so you can declare what all the sections are, what things you're going to be doing, and then the CPP actually goes off and do it. So in the header file, you've got, it sets up things like, I'm going to need to know the dimensions of my app, the resolution. And I don't want to know whether it's full screen or not. I want to know what kind of, functions I want inside my game. So I want to sort of put them there at the beginning. So when I start my program, I already know every single function I may call in it. But here's the problem. Because our header file has now been renamed, the CPP file that needs to include it is wrong, you see, because it doesn't know that you changed that name there. See, Visual Studio is not that clever yet. Maybe one day we can right click there and have it automatically figure out that we changed that to that. There's always another step. Hello world, because that's what we called it. So now all them red lines disappear, which means this is going to compile. And just like we did with tier 1, if we just press run, see, just hello world, and then it's just a frame rate. If we look at our tier 2, same template, and we click that, and we have to compile this one. Little fail, doesn't like that because the core is referencing template as well. So, and you see, I didn't have to know that in advance. Visual Studio is clever enough to throw up lovely, useful, informative error messages. So not only did it say what was wrong, it took you to the line, and because you kind of figured out, well, that's the only thing I changed from the template, and the template worked, then that's what I need to change. So it does help you along in many ways. And there you go. Same thing, just a blank screen with frame rate on it. So going back to the header, as you can see, there's almost nothing there really. It's just begin, loop, and end. Those functions are begin, loop, and end. And we have this namespace just so we can say that if we are calling particular things and it doesn't know the namespace, that's the preferred namespace it should be looking for. App is a class that holds onto lots of many useful things, but you'll find out about that when you get a little bit more advanced. But what you want to know about is something really simple. How do I create from scratch a hello world program? So I'm not going to delete things. In C++, you find it's very useful never really to delete anything ever. It's always useful to just comment it out. Comment is 2 forward slashes. The reason I do that is that if I delete lots of stuff and then run it and then things really have broken, what was it that broke it? Could be anything. And do you remember everything that you deleted? No. So it's best to comment it out until you're absolutely sure of what's going on. So that should compile, but this time no blue screen, no what do you call it, FPS readout. So if you want to do hello world, I would suggest you start with print hello world. Now that's what you would do in tier 1, wouldn't it? You do it here, you do print hello world. You'd have a sync, obviously, so you can jump to the screen, and a do loop. I mean, we can argue we don't need any of these things as well. In fact, let's not have a sync, let's just run it. Yeah, you can see why I need the sync, because you know what the sync does? It actually allows the window to run through its own processes. It's not just what this one command does. Imagine all the other background things that a regular Windows app has to do. You know, it's no fun to have to write all that yourself. Fortunately, we've wrapped it up in one command called sync, and that'll take care of. You see where the window froze then? It's because sync was denied its opportunity to do all that thing. So now we can actually do it. Yes, you got your hello world as before. So hopefully that makes some sort of sense. So here we got the same thing. Now, like I introduced last week, but I won't dwell too much on it again. I don't want to repeat myself too much. In tier 1, you got this do loop, and you're used to that construct. But in tier 2, we're taking care of more of the loop stuff for you. So we're only going to give you the opportunity to fill in this bit, and that bit is this bit. And we don't need sync, because remember I said we are taking care of more of the loop stuff. We include taking care of that sync. So we do that for you, which is why you can just do print. Actually, I don't know whether we are doing the sync actually, because that would seem a bit hidden functionality. But the reason it's underlined red is because it has absolutely no idea what print is. Because in tier 1, we already know using AGK tier 1 basics, so we know which commands you're referring to. In tier 2, you can have any number of functions all called print from different libraries from all around the world. So you need to specify that this is the AGK library you're referring to. Then the compiler will know, it removes the red, and you can run it. Now, does this freeze as well? Well, it will if you don't put the semicolon at the end of every single C++ line. Yes, it will definitely not let you run it. So we run that, and it looks like, after all, we do need the sync. So yeah, pretty good. I like this, you see, because it means, you know, there's a lot of synergy between tier 1 and tier 2. I had assumed the sync was taken care of outside there, but it's being very true to word. So there you go. So technically what this hello world program's doing, the sync is actually a double buffer command. What it is, it renders to a screen in the background, the one you don't see, and then it does, when it does the sync, it swaps that. And when it swaps it, it takes the one you can't see and it displays it on the screen you can see. At the same time, it takes the memory that it was currently looking at, that was the screen you could see, and it moves that into the space of the screen you can't see. Then you can write on that. So essentially, it's as if I was drawing on the back of a piece of paper. You can't see what I'm drawing. Only until I flip the paper round can you actually see what I've drawn. But now I can draw on the back of that paper and draw a little bit more. Again, you can't see what I'm seeing until I flip the paper around. Now you see what I've just drawn, but now you can't see the thing you was just looking at, you see. So I can now draw on that first piece of memory again. And that's basically the analogy for double buffers and why sync is needed, because it's the command that does the flip. You just flip, flip, flip. Otherwise, I'll be constantly drawing on the back of the paper. You'd never see Hello World on the screen. So that is how you would create a Hello World from scratch. And just to make it identical to the tier 1, I think we saw in the tier 1 another command, didn't we? Set window title Hello World. Because if you run C++ one, it just says AGK at the top. We want to say a name. So would that work? Now, you've noticed, here, put that there and put a semicolon in the end. Those things, you have to do that every single time. Might seem a bit, why do I have to do it every time? Can I just do something that says don't do it? No, because you're in C++, and any time you can insert any other kind of command above or below any of the AGK calls. So you really need to play nicely. Yeah, the reason we have to put it in the begin is similar to what I was saying. Do loop has been taken care of, but everything before it, you know, we don't really know what you want to do up here. We're just really starting with the do and the loop from what you've seen so far. So what we did was say everything between there and there, we're going to put in the begin. So that's where you put all that code. And what you don't see is, let's just put something in so you can see it. Blah, 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 blah. Let's say, I don't know, end. Yeah. All that stuff, everything after the loop, then gets put into this end. So we are done. And that's how it breaks up. That's how you get all your tier 1 bits into tier 2. Well, at least that's the logic of it. But essentially, this is where you put all the stuff that you're going to load and create all your assets once only. And then once they're loaded, you keep them in resource memory. And then the loop takes care of all the menus, games, levels, submenus, app screens, all the kind of stuff that you need to do. Even loading stuff in, that's fine, but all inside here. And then when you're finished, maybe you want to save your position or save some settings, pop it in here, and then the system will automatically free up all the resources. You don't have to worry about clearing the heap. So hopefully, in theory, this should work because I just copied it and pasted it into here. This is the correct name. There's no error lines. So let's just run it. And do we get our title change? Yes. Hello World with Hello World printed. So that's how you would create what I would call a one-line program. If you wanted to go a little bit further, let's say you didn't want to keep doing this. Let's just close down tier 1. You've had enough of tier 1. You just want to stay in tier 2. How would you survive? Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I'll tell you how you could find commands. I think this will work. Remember, I've not used AGK in quite a while. So AGK is the class, and then the dot dot means you want to look into the root of that class. Now, in the root of that class is all these things, and I want you to think and tell me what they are. Have you figured it out yet? This is every single command in AGK 2. All of them. So if ever you were confused to what a command was called, you don't really have to look it up online or on our documentation or go onto a forum. Just scroll through. Just scroll through to find the command you want. Fortunately, you don't have to do that. That would take a very long time. If you remember any of your commands from AGK Tier 1, that's enough. So let's say I wanted to... I don't want to load anything. I don't have anything to load. Let's say I wanted to create a sprite. Can I go to create a sprite without an image? I don't know. Could I? I don't know. I'll just see what I can do. AGK ... make. Can we make something? We can make a folder. Oh, can we create something? Ooh, what we can create. We can create all these things. Create an advert. Create an edit box. Create some memory. These, now we're talking. Create object box. That's my cup of tea. So you see, I didn't have to remember. I'll go to some documentation. I just had an inkling for what I want to do. I want to create something, or load something, or make something. I'll do that. And now, what's really good about C++, put a bracket in. You can see there's 2 overloads to this. You've got one version of the command which takes 3 parameters, width, height, and length. And the second one which takes an object number with width, height, and depth. I prefer object numbers. The rest of the entire universe doesn't. So object 1, 10, 10, 10. Typed badly. And that means that worked. But I also know I don't want to keep creating. Remember, this loop gets called every cycle. I don't want this create box, create box, create box all the time. Happy for Hello World to do that, but I only want to create this box once. So rather than go to begin, where you might think you'd put it, I like to stay in the loop because I'd only have the begin for really app initialization stuff. I'd prefer to put all my initialization, creations, destructions and stuff like that in the loop through state engines and things. And what I mean by that is, if this object doesn't exist, then I create it. But once it's created, it will skip this condition because it will suddenly become true. What I mean by that is, we need a command for seeing if the object exists. So object Yep, there is. Get object. See how clever it is? Even though I put object, it figured out, you really want to get object to exist. That's very clever. The object number, well, it's 1. It's the one I'm wanting to create. What did it return? Did it say? Int. Okay. So if it's 0, so it doesn't exist, then create my object. But next time it comes around the loop, it will exist, so it'll skip that create object command and it'll just do hello and sync. So in theory, that should do something nice. So if we run, should be no errors. Apart from that, ignore that. That is not AGK. Can't take responsibility or kudos for that error. That is entirely Microsoft's bug. So on the rare occasion, you see, that's because I didn't write this. Paul wrote it. That's why there is no errors in AGK. There's only errors in Microsoft. And I didn't write the ones for Microsoft. They did that all by themselves. But that's fine. It usually works most of the time. And there you go. A lovely cube. And I didn't have to go to tier 1 and convert it to tier 2. I just sort of figured out all by myself how to load in a cube. How cool is that? And now I've got the buzz, I'm going to go a little bit further. Can I go and find a texture, maybe from the Snake Snacker? What's this background look like? Ooh, nice. I'm going to nick that background. You can get images from anywhere. I'm going to bring it into my Hello World program. Now, maybe I'm going too fast. This is your project with all your files and your things. You've got a little folder here called Final. This is actually your executable area. This is where everything runs. And if you grab a file from your app, it's going to look here first. So I'm just going to drop this one in, background.png. I always cut and paste the whole thing because typos are very easy. Whilst I'm creating my box, wouldn't it be great if I could texture it with a lovely little image? Again, AGK : I think it's going to be a load. What kind of load commands have we got? Well, we've got a load image. Will do me. You've got 4 overrides for this. You can just supply a file name and get an image back. You can specify an image that you want. You can have a flag that says back to alpha and back to alpha on the return. We've already done the specifying index. Let's do the other kind now where we can get an index. So remember I pasted my image file name into the clipboard. So I just pasted that into the command because it only takes 1 parameter. But it returns what? An image index or ID, however you want to call it. Let's call it ID. Index is a bit suggestive. But that's not going to be enough because created an object and I've loaded in an image, but those two don't connect, do they? We're going to need to paint the object with the image. And to paint an object, you could try paint, but that's not going to get you very far. No paint words whatsoever in the entire AGK language. Because we're dealing with 3D, and if anyone's familiar with 3D, you're probably familiar with textures. So let's try put texture. What do we have for texture? Not as many as you might think. How about set object transparency? New. It's an interesting one, isn't it? How would you go about texturing an object? Text your that is a good one. Set object. Let's just put object. Let's find all the object commands. Of course, AGK, otherwise it's going to try and look it through the entire root of C++, which is not going to be very useful. We apologise for the delay in transmission. He's having a senior moment. Okay, I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation for all this. Set object 3D. We got colour. I don't want colour. I want to texture it. Of course. Got there in the end. Not paint, not texture. Why not? Image is the image we just loaded. Is the most perfect command. I should really have thought of that straight away. But then there you go. Shows my ineptitude. I dare say everyone who's familiar with Tier 1 are probably screaming at me right about now. Yes, sorry about that. So we've got the object number because I wanted 1. So I'm going to put 1 in. Now we've got the image ID because we actually loaded that in, so we type out the variable image ID. And it wants a texture stage. For those who want to know about texture stages, easiest way I can explain it is imagine you've got a building that's light mapped, and the building consisting of two textures. You've got the brickwork, what you can see, so there's all the bricks. Imagine the building is entirely made of bricks, even the windows and doors, it's all brick. But if you've light mapped it, and the light's on one side of the building, then you'd have light bricks on one side and dark bricks on the other. But how do you think that dark stuff gets turned into a texture and applied to the object? Well, it does that by having two different sets of UV coordinates. UV coordinates are telling the texture exactly where to map on the object. And the texture for the brick and the texture for the light map are two different textures, spread out differently, and will have to be mapped, wrapped differently onto the object. And so you need two different sets of data for that. So when you do texture stage 0, you're specifying typically, well, there's no typical about it, it's however you've decided to create your object. If you've put all your light mapping UV data in stage 0, then you would stick your brick texture in 1. Now, ignoring all that for a second, by default, one object with one image created like this, you just use texture stage 0. So we just pop a 0 in there. Now in theory, this should load in that background texture that we've dropped into our folder, background.png, and then apply that image to that object. And just so I'm absolutely super clear, I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to call it, you've noticed I've got, in tier 1 you just do that. In fact, you just do that. But C++ would really hate that. 1, it's not going to imply any sort of variable data type. You have to specify it specifically in C++, so you know it's an integer. And you also have to say that's the end of my instruction. So you have to put a semicolon, and then it likes you. And then that 1 is actually our object ID. Create an object, object ID, and then we set object image, object ID. So you know where that 1 came from. This is better coding. Even better coding, you wouldn't use literals here. You would actually set up something like size 10, and then for your 3 dimensions of your cube, or rather your box, size. So you're never left wondering really what these literals are inside commands. You've always got a nice description of them, but you can take that a bit too far sometimes. So if I run that, we should have textured cube. Yes. You see what I talked about before about the UV coordinates? How would I know to map that onto that side and that onto that side? And why is it that way around? Why can't it be rotating 90 degrees that one way or the other? Well, the UV data that's built into that cube at texture stage 0 tells the texture how to map onto that object. It's pretty complicated stuff when you get into it, but it's certainly not insurmountable, and it's a great challenge if you want to get into it, deal with more 3D related stuff. The last thing I'd want to do, because I think we've already gone over the 30 minutes, so we may as well just add a few more bits of information for those who want to learn from scratch in tier 2, which is no bad idea. In fact, I might make this a whole hour actually. What the hell? This is good, I'm enjoying myself. So why have I done that? Well, just as in tier 1 you can have else statements, but there's no end if. You just have these curly brackets to decide this is the if part, and then this is the bit if that condition is false. So run this if the condition is true, run this if the condition is false. The condition is false when the object exists, so by now the object does exist. And because it exists, we can have a little bit of fun with it. So what I'm going to try and do is rotate it. So I'm thinking of rotate, so we'll type rotate. What have we got? We can rotate the camera, we can rotate the object around a global, a bone local, an object local, around a point. Lots of lovely options. So I think the one you're probably familiar with would be rotating around Y local. That would be the equivalent of, say, a dirt basic command, which would be rotate object Y. So that works. What parameters have we got? It wants an object ID, so we'll pop that one in there. What else does it need? An amount that it rotates. Now, whether this is an incremental rotate or is it just fixing the angle? So let's find out. We'll just put 1 in. If it spins, it's an incremental command. If it doesn't spin, that is an absolute rotation value. I think it's an absolute. It's an incremental. So the command actually rotates. Whatever it's at, it will rotate it some more. So that's what it does. Didn't really know that, did I? We also noticed something else. Hello World has shifted to the screen. Why is it there instead of not filling out the margins? The reason is, remember that command we remmed out. Remember we didn't delete it? Which is good now, because you're going to think, well, why has it done it? Well, we know, because that changed the aspect ratio into a 4:3. Whereas by default, it's a percentage system. It's 100 by 100. It will give you a square. So if we run that, we get actually the 4:3 aspect ratio, which is the window. Which is great. Let's have it spin a little bit faster. So increase. So instead of increment it by 1, we'll increment it by 2 degrees per cycle. So every time it refreshes, and remember, you saw it earlier, it runs at 60 frames per second by default. I'm sure you can change that. We're basically rotating 2 degrees every frame. There are 60 frames in 1 second, so we're rotating 120 degrees per second. So that's that. So that's how you would do. And this is actually one of the first things you'd really want to do if you wanted to get into 3D. Create an object, texture it, rotate it. Now, it wouldn't be great if we could move it about. You know, getting something on the screen is great, but having, you know, pressing keys and then seeing what happens, that's the real fun stuff. So we've got it rotating. We don't really want to try and move an object that doesn't exist, so we want to put all the commands for moving the object in the same place as rotating it, because we know it exists by this point, you see. What's the opposite of get object exists is 0? Well, 1, because it exists. Now we need some commands for detecting some keys so we can move the object about. Now I'm going to guess again. So let's say key presses. Key down. Okay. What's the parameter? Index. So it probably wants some sort of scan code, which is the hardware index. I wonder if there's like some shortcut keys. Probably not. Press. Touch pressed. Key down. Key. Nope. Looks like there's no hard and fast ways. We're just gonna have to do it the best way. So it wants an index. We'll just tap index for now. And I presume if it's sort of not 0, then you'll have pressed whatever that the index represents, whatever that is. Remember, you know, you can't just stick a variable in. You actually have to declare everything. Now it's putting a red line under there because it's saying, remember, you just hover over any red line, it tells you a little bit more information. It needs an arithmetic, unscoped enum or pointer type. Let's see what it is. Key down. Public static void, key down, signed in the wrapper. It's in the wrapper. I wonder if that is actually a command at all, actually. Who knows? Tell you what, I've been rambling for 44 minutes now, and the great thing about live chat is people can post any questions. And if people's watching me fumbling with this key man, they might have come up with an answer for me. No, they haven't. In fact, the chat is quite quiet, which is pretty good. No questions, so I can ramble on for the next 20 minutes. Well, I'll probably be rambling on about what is the key for this. Input. Is there a text input, key input, command, something like this? Press. Touch pressed. What's that command do? Alright, it basically touch input. Device subs will need to be called, notified, blah 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 blah. I'll tell you what I do remember a command for. This one definitely I know. Get pointer pressed. Haha. Let's say that. Are you going to let me have that one? Now I know what that command does. You have to press the left mouse button and then that would register a non-zero value. And in fact, just so we know what's going on, we can actually do print that. So actually print out it as well as respond to it. And when we respond to it, what I want to do is the object to move into the distance. So I think move, good, move object, yeah. Now it lets me move it in object local directions. X is left and right, Y is up and down, Z is in and out. So I'm going to choose in and out. It wants an object number, which we can readily provide, and an amount, which will be the amount of units you're going to move this object. So let's just move it by 2 for now. And then we'll run that. Hopefully no compile errors. So, oh, I know what it's doing. Can anyone guess what it's doing? Wait till it rotates. And a bit more. Yeah, that's what it means by local. You see, because it's rotating, it's like facing different directions all the time because it spins. The Z keeps changing. Forward for the object isn't forward for us, the viewer sitting watching the monitor. Forward for that object is whichever direction it's decided to spin at that particular moment. If we set it to global, we're not interested in the direction the object's facing. We actually are interested in it pushing it into the screen. So move object. Oh, that is interesting. I guess that's the same, camera local Z, because the camera is, you know, what's looking at the object. And I'm guessing you don't need the object. Well, you must need the object. Yeah. Oh. This moves the camera along the camera's local Z. Right, so we can't use that. So how do we move that object? With the move command, probably not. Now remember there was rotate on a global, but there's probably not much call for move global. It's a bit of an odd thing actually. When you come down to actually controlling 3D objects, not much call for move global. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. Not that I've actually tried, but if we did set object position, and now this has some parameters, object with X, Y and Z. So right now it wants these kind of parameters. See, float fx and 2 more. Okay, so what's that going to do is when I press the mouse button, I'm going to set 3 variables, float variables. Float is so you've seen integers. These are floats. These are decimals, points. These are ones you can move about. You know, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, that kind of thing. And at the moment, we're just going to set them all to 0, and then we'll have set object position. And so when we run it, I press the mouse button, nothing should really happen. See? Nothing's really happening. So what you can do, this is another clever thing, is take the Z position of the object, which I think is get object position, and no, you just change it to set, thank you. I want get. Do we even have get object position? We have it in physics, which is fine. Get object pointer. Maybe it's not a get, maybe it's just object position. Yes. I always say there is no substitute for documentation. But I just wanted to show that I've actually gone this far with very vague knowledge of AGK, and I've almost created a little push the cube down the screen game. But yeah, you can see how this can start sucking up a few hours and days and months and years of your time if this was your preferred method. So there's another way, which I'm going to show you now. If you go to your friendly website and you go to AGK documentation, even misspelled, you'll find us. And this takes you to this, which is what's called online documentation. You can go to commands, Then go to 3D. This gives you all the 3D commands, so that's all the bones, shaders, general ones. These are the object ones. So you can get object angles, 3D vectors from screen, useful, but we want something a bit basic. Get object exists, get all the rays, get quads, the rays, get object world, quadrangle, well no, that's a quaternion. Ah, there it is, get object Z. Who'd have thought? But that was good really, because then I could show you how to get the documentation. And then it needs the object ID. And what that's going to do is get the current Z. But if you're getting the Z and then just applying it to the Z position, nothing's going to happen. Exactly. So what we're going to do, every time we grab it, we're going to add 2 to it. So every time we click it, we're going to add 2. So let's make it a bit better. Let's make it 10. And run that. So now we get to see some fun. Click, 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 click. That's how you move it on a global axis. Haha. Yes, indeed. Off into the distance. And now we've got a brilliant game. We don't need Hello World anymore. And we don't need our debug information anymore. And let's say we wanted to have a nice colour for our game. So I'm going to choose no red, no green, and 64 units of blue. So it's a darker one. Run that. So now we have a nice blue backdrop for our little cube, Hello World cube game. And let's say we wanted it really fast. So instead of 60, I'm going to have a 120 frames a second game. And is it 120 frames a second? What happened to that command we just deleted? Remember, it's AGK : then the command, then AGK : and then another command, which in this case is screen FPS. Close that first bracket again, run it. Do we get 120 sync rate? No, we didn't. It won't let me have it. I reckon it's because something in core is stopping me having it. Set it to mode, run. I think what this is, it's because it's a window. If it was full screen, you could have lots of lovely FPS and different rates. So we don't need that one, and I don't really need that one, I don't think, so we'll delete that as well. So that's our stuff that sets up our app. So set up main app / game, main loop. We don't need the comment, but what we do need is create object to manage. And then once we've created the cube, then we can rotate the cube. Type. Rotate the cube, move the object, and then update the screen. Why did I just do all that? I've just been explaining it all to you. Reason is, comments are good. If you don't do it now, then later on you're going to kick yourself, because when you give it to someone else, they'll have no idea what your program does. And just to show what the end one is, even though it's completely redundant, if you look here, we created an object, we loaded in an object, an image, and we did things with it. So what we can do, just copy that stuff, and a little bit of time. I think it's good we complete this. I'm just going to call this free resources. This is another good thing. If you're creating new code and you're creating new resources that you know you're going to delete at some point during the game, do the delete stuff at the same time as the create stuff. That way, later on, you're not going to forget it, because you absolutely will. I've never met anyone who didn't forget it. So what we're going to say is, if that object exists, then delete that object. Dink. And I imagine it's much the same with the image. Does image exist? Image 1. If that's 1, delete image. I imagine that's correct. Yep. And use the image. So you can see before we leave, and it's completely redundant because it frees the heap anyway, but if this wasn't the end, this was just something in your state machine in your main loop, and you did want to get rid of these resources because you don't have hog memory, the device that you're running on doesn't really have that much memory, then this will do the trick. Only if it exists, delete. Only if it exists, delete. It's a nice safe way of doing things. And if you want the most uber safe way, then you can set it to 0. But there's no reason to do that at all. Now you notice the 2 red lines. This brings me to the one other thing that I think Hockey Kid mentioned about you can't really do things in C++ like you do them in BASIC. For example, because it's a different function, it has no idea what iObjectID is. Absolutely no. You could create another one here. That will be a different variable. Different variable, different value. Forget about it completely. You may have solved the errors, but that's silly. What you need to do is make sure that it's the one and the same. Now, in order to do it so you can get it running, you have to use dreaded globals. But there's another way. I'll just show you the globals way. So instead of declaring your object here and here, you declare them here. Why does that work? Because now they're not inside this function, they're not nested, so they're local to this, they're actually global. They're not belonging to any particular function, they're belonging to everything. Makes it very easy to get all your program working, but it also makes it very dangerous because sticking everything at the top with no structure is very dangerous when your program gets large. But this should run. That's even I just hack straight into the code and move things around. Still runs. I've been doing this a while. I know it would work. But there's another way. There's another way instead of this, and that's to create a structure. And we've got 2 minutes left. So I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call it main. I'm going to wrap that up in that. I'm going to pop that there. I think there's a semicolon in the end, as I recall. And now you've got these, and there's some Hungarian notation. Is it called Hungarian notation? I think it's called. It basically says, look, because you're now a member of this class, you probably want to put that in there. And then if you want to make access to that, that's just a class right now. You need to actually have an actual thing. So we call that main. So that's now that. But now you don't really have that anymore because it's not a global. It's like, where is that? Well, it's not part of this crazy class thing. So how do you get access to that? Well, it's simple. You just use main to reference it, like so. And those red lines should disappear, which they're not doing. They're not doing because it's no longer that. It's m_that. And the way it's not doing it now is it's inaccessible. Why is it inaccessible? Because you need to make it public. So now you have a public member, which goes into that. So now is it accessible? Can I have it? Does it disappear? Yes. And now anytime you see the error with the object, you just replace it not only with the object ID member, it's all of it. So we go down, and I also want to mention, as I was nearly running out of time, that this is also the wrong way to do things. This is just a way to introduce you to what would classes look like if they acted like global variables. Well, they'd look kind of like this. Instead of just being some random name, they're actually part of something, some wrapped, a structure, a wrapper for it. So now this can still run once the last of the image IDs have been found and neutralized. This still runs, but now it's actually using something called a class structure, where you can define not only variables, you can put functions in these classes. You can create copies of these classes. You can have subclasses that use all the features of a parent class, but then you can add extra features in subclasses. Lots of wonderful things you can do it. But essentially, that's what a global would look like if it was a class. And I managed to squeeze it in under the hour. So hopefully, I think I've covered quite a lot actually. I only meant to do Hello World, and you've ended up with a nice little program which spins a cube, and then it runs off into the distance. Well, it isn't anymore. Lee broke it. But I'll let you have a look at the video, and maybe you can post in the forum what I did wrong, just to show that it was paying attention. And just got some feed from the chat in the end. The actual command I was looking for when I wanted to detect a key was get raw key pressed. So that was the command, get raw key pressed. Phew. Thanks, community. So that's an AGK broadcast done. This is only the second one. Please feedback in that forum you saw earlier if you want to see more. Because I didn't really get any questions or any difficulties people were having moving from Tier 1 to Tier 2, there probably won't be one next Thursday. But if you want to see one posted in that forum, I'd be quite happy to do so. I think it's actually good fun. And it's re-educating me in how to code stuff from scratch. Because the project I'm on, Game Guru, I've been coding it for several years now. So I haven't seen from scratch in that long. So this is actually quite a little bit of good fun. But I hope it was useful. And so, yeah, check it out next Thursday, 4 PM British Summer Time, if there is another one. If you want to find out if there is, or what the subject's going to be about, or if you want to suggest a topic, put it in the forum, which you can find here. It's actually called AGK Twitch broadcast today, 4 PM BST, learn how to port Tier 1 to Tier 2. We'll just keep that title, just post it in at the end, and then I'll make this a video and I'll post that for people who weren't involved in the live broadcast. So until next Wednesday, when I'm switching back over to Game Guru, twitching, I shall say goodbye and have a good weekend and have fun in your new life as a C++ Tier 2 AGK programmer. So until next week, I'll say goodbye.